Kumiko and the Dragon by Briony Stewart. Chapter 4. I have never been on anything in my life that moved so quickly. Tomodo and I speed across the land like we are made of the wind itself, slipping between the mountains and making holes in the clouds. It is at once the most wonderful and the most terrifying thing I have ever done. I hold on to Tomodo so tightly my hands hurt. But I hardly notice this because looking down, I see we are flying over places I have never seen before. And I know I have never been so far away from my home. Below us, our moonlit shadow races over rice fields, and in the distance I see only black, as though the land is coming to an end. Tomodo flies more slowly, and I see that we are near the ocean. Many small houses crowd near the water, and all around them fishing boats sway up and down. We land on a roof with green tiles. Shaking, I slide off Tomodo and squat beside him, wondering why he has brought me to this place.
I have brought you here, Kumiko, because this is where your story begins,
says Tomodo, answering my curiosity. He looks around at the boats. He looks at the water and the stars, and then he says to me,
"A dragon should never be underestimated. Though some may be small, no bigger than mice, they could be the most powerful dragons of all. Every dragon is born with different abilities. For instance, I have the gift of speed, and I can hear the curiosity of all creatures. Some dragons are wise. Others breathe fire or ice. Others sing songs that can make the wind turn back in fear, or the sun brighten with joy."
The pounding of my heart has begun to subside. Tomodo gives me a small smile.
"Now that you know this, I can tell you a story that happened a long time ago. A story I know well. And yes," he says with a wink, "you will see why soon."
I wrap my hands around my knees, curious to hear Tomodo's story.
"It begins in a kingdom that existed in the sky. A kingdom of dragons, a palace in the clouds. In this palace lived a dragon king who was terribly important because in his blood lay the most powerful magic that dragons knew. The magic that kept all dragons alive. If the Dragon King were to die, then so would every dragon that existed in the world."
"I think I've heard this story before,"
I say.
"My Oba-san told me when I was very young. The King of Dragons had 2 sons.
"Very good,"
says Tomodo.
"Raikou and Ramen were twin brothers. The magic that lay inside the blood of the Dragon King was passed on to them, but the twins had another power too. The ability to change from dragons into any animal they wanted to be. They could be a bird one day and a fish the next. Seemingly a very useful power to possess."
"Very," I say, and imagine myself turning into a tiny beetle whenever it was time to have a bath. Tomodo gazes around him.
"Now this right here is where the story comes to. This very fishing village we are sitting above right now."
I look between the lurching boats and the houses on the water, and I try to imagine what this village could possibly have to do with dragons. Tomodo laughs, which takes me by surprise, and continues,
"You see, one day Raikou was flying across this part of the ocean, and as he came nearer the shore, he saw a maiden from this village standing by the water, looking out to sea. Though she was human, she was so beautiful that Raikou forgot how to fly properly and fell into the ocean waves, overcome with love. When he climbed out of the water, he had changed himself to look like a man. He married the maiden and decided to live here on the earth with her forever. This might sound like a happy story, Kumiko, but it is not. Dragons were arrogant and disliked humans. They thought people were weak and foolish and possessed no wisdom at all. Because of this, Raikou's decision to remain a human was not taken well. When the Dragon King died, soon after the marriage, the other brother Raman became the new king. He was so angry with his twin for choosing to live on the earth that he told Raikou never to return to the palace in the clouds.
Tomodo sighs sadly, a sound like the wind before it rains.
So, Kumiko, the years eventually drifted by, and neither brother spoke to the other.
Not once?
I ask. Tomodo shakes his head.
Not even once. By the time 50 years had passed, which is a short time for dragons, but a long time for humans, Raikou had grown to be an old man. Because he lived a human life and not a dragon life, one day, like all humans, he died. When the news that Raikou had died came to the palace in the clouds, Raman was very sad that he had not stayed friends with his twin. He decided he had to go down to earth to attend the funeral and say goodbye. After some thought, Raman turned himself into a deer so he could watch the funeral quietly from behind the trees and not frighten anybody or appear to be a stranger. But something terrible happened, a tragic mistake. A hunter saw Raman there and, thinking that he was really a deer, shot him with a bow and arrow. Sadly, that was that. Both brothers were dead.
Tomodo stops for a second to see if this has upset me, but I draw my knees up to my chin and he goes on with his story.
Back in the Dragon Kingdom, all the dragons wept for their king and for their human prince Raikou, and they cried in misery that soon every dragon would die because King Raman had not yet had any children to pass on the magic of dragon life.
But it wasn't true,
I interrupt.
because you are a dragon, Tomodo, and you're alive, aren't you?
Yes, I am alive, and the magic is too.
Tomodo's mouth curls into a grin.
At first, even the wisest dragons could not understand how the magic could still exist with both the brothers gone. Some started to believe that maybe it had never been there at all. But then they remembered that Raikou and the maiden he had married 50 years earlier had had one child, a girl.
A human girl?
I ask.
Oh yes,
Tomodo's voice rumbles.
It angered some, but for most it was simply amazing. A human was carrying the sacred magic that kept all dragons alive. So, no matter how the news was taken, they all agreed that from then on, a powerful dragon should be made a guardian for Raikou's daughter, his granddaughter, his great-granddaughter, and so on, for all who carry the magic, to prevent us from ever coming so close to extinction again.
Tomodo looks straight into my eyes.
The great dragon Raikou was your ancestor, and though he lived 1,000 years ago, you and your sister carry in your blood the magic that keeps all dragons alive. This is why I guard you, Kumiko, for my life and for that of all dragons.
Tomodo turns to gaze at the sky, and I know that his story is true. But what a story it is! Mother simply would not believe it. But more than that, it is frightening to think that perhaps I am not the same person I was yesterday.